Okay, most of you know me. Oh, it's very dark now. Most of you know me. My name's Steve. I'm curator of instruments for the Society, but I've also been working with a small team, including Jonathan here, for the last 4 years, I think, on Keumu Observatory. So I want to talk a little bit about that tonight, about sort of the astronomy we're doing out west. The kind of subtext to my talk could also be about how does Murphy's Law affect astronomy, and and it does, and it really keeps doing so. So Keumu Observatory is near Keumu, unsurprisingly. It's a little bit outside actually, so it's in a reasonably dark site. It's reasonably high altitude compared to the land around it, but it does have sort of a protective band of trees around, and we're quite shielded from the city light, so it's actually quite a nice place to go. It's not too far out of the city, and it's a fairly dark site. Which is great because it's not just the work that we do. We have a lot of members who come out there and bring their own equipment as well. I'll talk a little bit about the history. Now, there actually may be quite a few people here who know a lot more about the history of Keumu than I do. So I've only been going there for the last 5 years or so. So I'll tell you what I know, and if anybody's got any interesting stories or if I get it wrong, feel free to shout out and put me right, because I've learned a lot of this stuff in the last couple of months. So the observatory was originally built in 1978 by Dr. Steve Cavalier, on whose site it sits. Steve Cavalier is a former president of the Society, and it was originally built to house a 12-inch Maxitop that was donated by John Orr. Now we still have that scope, and it's actually in the instrument room there, and we're still looking for somewhere for that to go. It seems the story of that telescope over the years is the Society's looking for somewhere for the John Orr telescope to go. Now this was one of the first places it ever was. The original building had a steel dome. What's really interesting about the original building, and you can just about make it out on this picture, is that it had a turf roof. Now, somewhere in somebody's collection is a picture of a horse stood on the roof of the observatory, and I tried as I might, I can't find that photo. So if anybody does have a photo of the horse on the roof of Keumu Observatory, please send me a copy. Steve tells me that he built this in 1978, 1979 in a year of Sundays. So he got help from a whole lot of local contractors, a whole lot of local building supply people, and a whole lot of Society members to put this thing together, to hold a telescope for the use of the Society. So it was always designed for the Society to come and have a place to go and observe, and for there to be a decent sized telescope in a decently dark site for people to use. Unfortunately, not long really, so in the mid-80s, so just a few years really after this was built, it wasn't getting a lot of use. The 12-inch Maxitop had tracking errors in the Mann, the dome used to leak. As a result of that, people didn't really go out there and use it very much. So it sort of fell into this use, and eventually the telescope was moved back to Auckland Observatory, to here to start on, in 1992, and it was refurbished by Grant Christie, who found it, who sort of found it in storage and said, "This is terrible. We've got to bring this thing back to life." And was actually used for the research program here.
I got Harry Williams and Andrew Goodfellow did the restoration. I just sort of cajoled them into doing it.
But you arranged it to happen. Yeah. So we got professionals to do the right work. That's sort of what you should do. And it was actually used here for research for the stuff that Grant and Tim do for about 3 years, 1997 to 99, 2000. There was not just the dome on site, so this is a large home-built Cassegrain. Now, Grant reliably tells me that that's Graham Loftus and Steve Cavalier.
No, it is Graham Loftus. I'm just, what's the other guy's name?
I know.
The guy in the black jacket.
But anyway.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell from the back. I don't know these people
anyway.
very well. So anyway, a large home-built Cassegrain was on there. This big concrete Mammoth, you'll see that again. It's actually still in existence. It had a roll-off shed, which had at least 2 iterations. And was built out of wood. Nobody knows what happened to the mirror, actually. There was a question we were talking to Steve Cavalier a couple weeks ago, what happened to the mirror. There's a little bit of a later photo of it. So this one was took in 2004. There's a little bit of a few changes on it. This thing here, piece of old machinery. What did we work out that it was, Grant? It's a piece of old lift machinery.
Yeah, it's something, could have been off a ship or a factory or something.
Yeah, so some industrial winch equipment or geared equipment, and it's a big heavy piece of thing. You'll see that as well, and that's still around at Keumu. In the late 80s, the leaky metal dome was replaced by this actually quite nicely built fiberglass and wood dome. In between, actually, there was apparently a roll-off roof, which I couldn't find any photos of, but Steve tells me that it was there, but that was really, really hard to use. So this dome, which is the same as we've got there today, was put in the late 80s, in 2000. And when it was put in there, Steve bought a new Meade 10-inch LX200 and put that up there and put that for members to use. Unfortunately, that also ended up with poor tracking, so it didn't get used for the sort of astrophotography and things that people were hoping that it would be, well, that Steve was hoping it was going to get used to. So between sort of in the early 2000s, again, it's sort of, there wasn't a lot of people going out to use the site, and a lot of that was equipment challenges. About 2003, this guy here, Dave Morehouse, who's a predecessor of mine, he was curator of instruments for the Society for a time. He built this beautiful 16-inch binoscope and a smaller binoscope as well. And he and a group of his friends were looking for a dark site where they could go and do some observing. Obviously, he built these great scopes. He didn't want to just use them in his backyard, so finding a bit of site to do visual observing was really important to him. So he hit upon coming to Keumu, and that was his base for viewing with a 16-inch scope. He wasn't interested at all in doing any of the imagery or science work. He just wanted to do visual astronomy. That was his passion, and that's why he built fantastic instruments. So this was all home built. There used to be a website, which I don't think is there now, but you can find it on Wayback Machine. It was binoscope.co.nz, and Dave goes through the process of how he built that. So it's actually worthwhile having a look at that. In 2004, Dave and the crew he was working with decided, well, this visual stuff's great, but let's get in this dome and get this LX200 working. It can't be that bad, right? We'll do some work with it and we'll do some images. They tried and tried, but actually failed because the periodic error was really, really bad. I think it was like a couple of arc seconds or something, or more. So they didn't really succeed. Now remember I said just before that the John Maxitoff from Keumu came here?
Yep.
Well, that was replaced in 1999-2000 with this scope. Now this scope is a Celestron 14-inch. It was donated from the Nastrini family after a sort of family tragedy. The scope became available and was given to the Society for use in research.
I think it was actually loaned to the Society.
Well, I think it's technically a loan. It's still around. And when that came here, that was actually put on a decent mount. It's put on a robotic mount, power mount. So the fork mount that it was on wasn't needed. So that fork mount got sent to Keumu, and what Dave and the crew decided to do is they took the 10-inch Meade and they managed to jury-rig it onto this fork mount and use that for some observing. So that worked for a little while, and then in 2007 the scope got replaced. So the Nastrini scope got reunited with its Mammoth. So the scope's moving in between these observatories the whole time, and got put back in the dome, or got put in the dome at Keumu. So it had a push-to mount, so the fork mount wasn't a go-to. You couldn't connect it to your computer and say, hey, point here. So you had to push it to what you were observing. It was tracked, and Dave and the team upgraded the gears in here to buyer's gears, so it was very accurate tracking. So a lot better than the Meade was, and a lot more useful. The OTA is actually about 40 years old, so it's quite an old scope, but they actually got quite a lot of use out of it. To manage with it being pushed to, they put an Argo Navis digital setting circles solution in, so that basically reads out the angles of the RA and DAC and allows you to fairly accurately point it to where you need to point it to. So it's like having a go-to scope without the motors, so you move it there, it'll tell you whether you're on target or not, and then you can image. They were doing work, quite a lot of imagery work, some of it for the microlensing follow-up network, so a microphone. From there they got a camera, which is a SBIG ST10 XME, that's still around today. And they did quite a lot of really, really useful observations, and they were publishing a number of scientific papers as to getting data for a number of observations. So really, really active. Around about 2009, 2010, there was a whole lot of activity done by Dave Morehouse and Guy Thornley and Michelle NOLA, that's right. So those three of them did a whole lot of work. Now Dave was also responsible for organising a lot of upgrades of the buildings and just the general observatory area. This isn't Dave actually. This is Peter McLeod, who's the next door neighbour, who happens to be a handy builder. Up a ladder, sawing out part of the wall so that Dave could put a window and some insulation in there to keep it a little bit warmer at night. So that was in 2010. So quite a lot of work happened around that 2010 time. A lot of changes, extra floor coverings, lots and lots of work happened. Dave also built another observatory on the site. This is called the Wasp Observatory after they found a large wasp nest there and just became known as the Wasp. The pier that's inside here, you'll notice, is that big concrete block that thing used to sit on with that gigantic home-built Cassegrain. So that was all changed. This is a roll-off roof shed. Dave was using this for astrophotography for many years, and he's mounted another mount on top of it, so it's not that angled part isn't actually used. But this is still here today. If you're interested in old machinery, you can go, oh, wow, isn't that piece of metal useless? And yeah, and I think last year we managed to get a reasonably sizable wasp's nest off that, which was quite fitting as well. The main dome itself is motorized, which makes it really useful, and it has a sensor which detects its position, controlled by a USB interface board and an ASCOM driver, and Jonathan and I have had 4 years of trouble trying to make this damn thing work again. But it did, and I'll get to what the current state is shortly. The scope itself, that's one of probably the last pictures of it when it was being used. It's got the juice strap on there, temperature compensating photo, juice strap. But still it was push to and quite hard to use. That's a picture of the old computer that was in there. High tech. It wasn't LCD though, so it's kind of cool. Dave also used to run astronomy workshops, and he did some of those for a time back in 2010 out of Keumu. There's a few familiar faces in here.
Graham Beasley at the front.
Graham Beasley.
Peter. To the right.
I did recognise a few more, but yeah, I think Tim was there somewhere in some of those. But anyway, it's quite a few familiar faces there. You see the old Cassegrain actually in the background as well. So in 2010 that was still around. I never saw it in one piece. Now, 2011, just a year after that, I said 2010 was really, really active. There was a lot of work done, a lot of upgrades to the observatory. There was a lot of observations done for microlensing. There was heaps happening. But 2011, Dave's circumstances changed, his work changed, and he didn't have enough time to do the stuff he was doing. So the observations really, really tailed off to just a few observations every year at that point. By 2014, basically it had been effectively unused apart from a couple of nights for 3 or 4 years. So 2014 is about when, well, I was assistant curator of instruments. I was in charge of the rental stuff. I was all excited and was this mythical observatory. I want to go see it. I want to have a look at it. And I think Gavin, who's somewhere around, he was on the council as well. And we had this big thing about we need to get Keumu working. It's a great asset. We're not using it, and there's a few of us who'd be really interested in getting it going. So in 2014, I got a key and drove out there with my 2 daughters, and let's have a look at this kit. Let's see what, I'm sure we can make it work. So I had to poke around, took a few photos. This is my girls 5 years ago. Took photos of the camera, took photos of the mount, worked out what equipment was there, and had a chat to a couple of others, Jonathan included, about how do we get this thing working again. Had a chat also with Dave Morehouse and said, you know, what was the process that you used? How do we get it working? And it was the feeling that we got is it's a bit fiddly to get everything working, but it does work, and the camera's good and the scope's good, so it's a good basis for it. The site was also still being used quite regularly by a number of keen observers who were just using the site. They weren't using the main dome. They had their own scopes they were taking out there and using quite often, and still are. There's still quite a few people do go out there. And in fact, at that point, for a couple of years, Dave's 16-inch binoscope was still there. He'd actually sold it on to somebody else who was keeping it out there and observing through it. Now, I actually don't know where it is. I should get quite exactly where it is in a minute. If you ever get a chance to look through a 16-inch binoscope, it's amazing. It is the best visual astronomy that I've ever done looking through that scope. I think Jonathan will agree with that one. So we got to use that one night, and that was awesome. But going back to the main dome, we were looking around, and as well as the obvious stuff we could see, there was a lot of dust, there was a lot of spiders, there was a lot of rusty bits, there was a lot of wires that were poking out and not really plugged in, there was computers that didn't turn on and didn't work, and we were a bit afraid to plug some of the equipment in case it blew up. So we ummed and ahed, we had a look at what we had, and we really didn't do very much for probably about another 6 or 7 months, apart from saying we need to come up with a way to get it working and go out there and spend a couple of days and play with it, and with weather and all those things. It never really happened. But what happened the year after is, remember this scope again? This is when that scope was here on this mount. Well, this mount became available because Grant upgraded this mount to the latest version. And as soon as I heard about this, my ears pricked up immediately, and I was like, what are the chances of Stardome, because Stardome owns the mount, letting us borrow this for a little while? Because surely nobody else is going to use it. Anyway, long story short, it was worked out that we could borrow this, but before it was going to go anywhere else, it had been stuck up in the other dome for 10 years or so, probably. Needed a bit of TLC, needed to be lubed, needed to be pulled apart to make sure everything was good before we moved anywhere else. Unfortunately, what happened is, and this is another one where sort of Murphy's Law kicks in, whilst it was on the bench in the library out there, actually just waiting to be lubricated and just set up and be tested, somehow, and nobody really knows what happened, it managed to get slewed past its limit. So there's a hard physical stop on a screw, and that must have been removed at some point for cleaning, and the mount had been turned around too many times. And what happens when you've got a mount with a lot of wires inside and you turn around it more than it's supposed to do, more than one turn, is you start to tear wires apart and rip connectors off and things like that. So with the help of Tony down the back there, we managed to put some new connectors and new cables, and we managed to gingerly get this thing working again. Tinder 2 helped a lot with that as well, and we took it out to Keumu. So we were really excited. We got the old fork mount off, unbolted all the old bits of metal and wood that was holding it up, and we got this thing mounted to the pier. And what was really helpful was on the top of this plate, on the top there was a nice line scribed on the top which marked north and south. And it's really helpful to get it lined up as we tighten this thing up and we put it together. And then we went out and bought a brand new computer, and we went and got all the wires out of all the boxes and said, right, this equipment, so remember it was just the mount we changed, there wasn't anything else. We started to get the camera and the focuser and all the other bits and pieces working. So we had a box full of cables and we had wires everywhere, and we were making serial connectors on the fly, and we were plugging things in, and things weren't working, and things then started working. And we managed to get everything sorted out and turned on and then tidied up. So we didn't get rid of the wires. And we were, right, let's take some images. So we hadn't got the motorized dome tracking or anything like that, but there's a switch, so the dome was moving, so we could move it with the switch. So we went, fired it up, took an image. So we took an image in Man 4, and it was awesome. This camera that had sat and not been used for 5 or 6 years, it actually turned on and worked. But the image wasn't great, to be honest. And you can actually see, this is a really short image, and you can see there's actually quite a lot of trailing on this. So those stars aren't round at all. Now, that's not a problem. We expected that, right? So we just put the mount on, and we hadn't polar aligned it. We just sort of fired it up, and we knew it was pointing south. And so we got this, and we got it working, and we worked it all out. We were getting progress, and that was great. So you'll see, actually, you look back on our blog, you'll see some of these stories from where we got progress, and everything's working. But we couldn't get it aligned. And we tried 2 or 3 nights, and we were doing a drift align, and it feels like this mount's not quite aligned properly. It feels like I need to go more clockwise with this. But we did put it north-south, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. So I said, okay, let's finish for the night. I'm going to come up tomorrow, I'm going to hang a pendulum from the dome and wait till solar noon, and I'll make sure that the north-south is fine. It's a great way of finding south. So, of course, it was raining the next day. So I was looking up at the sky, and it was 10 o'clock, and it was still raining, and my wife said, come on, we've got to go out. And I was like, I need to go to the observatory at noon. And it was like, there's no sun. Why do you want to do that? It's not going to... But it might clear up. The weather forecast said it was going to be sunny. So anyway, I headed out there anyway. I thought maybe there'll be a gap in the clouds. And just as we're heading towards solar noon, a few gaps appeared. So I started, every time the sun was out, I'd crank up the dome, and I'd just mark off a line with some tape. So I was marking off a line with tape. So So you can see here, that was obviously 4th of October, so that was 13:05, and the solar noon this day was 1:10 past, and so 13:05 I managed to get a line, and then heavens opens, I close the dome again, and everything's getting wet, and I was, oh, I'm just going to go home, that'll be good enough to see where we are. Anyway, 10 past, bright sunshine. So, open the dome again, and scribe this line. So that's north-south. That's where we installed the map. We were a bit more. So,
Never trust a line.
never trust a line that's been helpfully scribed by somebody else, because it will waste you at least 2 weeks worth of effort. Because we had to pull all the equipment off, all the camera, all the OTA, all the nice careful balancing work we've done, all out of here, and we started again from scratch.
Was that magnetic or just random?
I think it was just random. I think it was just a line that happened to be on the aluminium plate, and we made an assumption.
Oh,
So when you make assumptions, Murphy bites harder. That's the lesson that you always have to learn. So after we'd done that, we managed to get, and this isn't a brilliant photo, the original looks better, it's a little bit fuzzy on there, but you can see that the stars are at least round. So we managed to get a polar alignment. So we were back in business. So we were pretty excited. So this is our operational setup with polar alignment working. We managed to get Max MDL working, we managed to get the SkyX working. We're capturing data. Some of our early images. So the last thing we did was testing the filters. The filters had been used 5 or 6 years as well. So this was our first RGB image that we did, which we were quite excited of Sculptor. I mean, it's not the best image ever, but showed we were on the right track. And we got one of Helix as well. So that was really exciting. So we've taken this equipment that was laid dormant and it wasn't being used at all, and everybody had forgotten it, and we got it all working, so it was brilliant. We started off next was, well, let's get this dome tracking, because we were able to image, but we're still having to move this dome around with this little toggle switch. So we had a look at the board there. We decided it's going to get wet there. We put it in a nice box. It used to be just stuck to the side. And it wasn't quite working, but yeah, it would sort of read out where the dome was moving to, maybe sometimes, but then but it would control the dome. So we ended up with, well, we got the computer and we got a button on the computer that can control the dome now. So that's a bit easier than getting up, but we still couldn't quite get it working out where the position of the dome was. We added the bits of things like a controller for the juice strap so that we could change the heat on that. Because kind of dewing is a bit of a problem. That we saw that many nights because summer wasn't great, to be honest. So we had very precious few nights that we could work on this. So doing a lot of major changes was a bit difficult. Then Murphy was coming at us again, just as we thought everything's working. Still had a bit of work to do on the dome. We ended up with this. Now, let's go and play this. It's not supposed to make the clunkity clunk noise. So, sorry, the video is really shaky because I was moving it around trying to see if the microphone could identify where this clunk was coming from. So, note that the worm drive there isn't actually engaged to the wheel. No. So that noise is coming and it's not actually moving anything. So, just as we get up and running, there's some mechanical issue with this mount. So we pulled the whole damn thing apart. We worked out that it was on that part there that you saw. We've got some photos. So again, telescope comes off, all of our carefully balanced and set up equipment had to come off, and we pull off the worm assembly. We could tell just by moving the worm assembly around that it didn't feel nice at all. It was certainly a bearing fault. We puzzled as what to do. There was some discussion, should we send this back to the States, to Software Bisque, which we certainly could have done. But then somebody had the bright idea, let's just give this to Graham Beasley, because he's a really bright engineer and he'll be able to work out easily how to get this sorted. So we thought it was a failed bearing. Graham confirmed that, and so one failed bearing. It cost us $17. So we're pretty glad we didn't send it back to the US. So I pulled it apart just to see what condition it was in. There you can see the grease in there. That was all full of sward, all full of metal filings. The ball